Why struggle through a post-merger integration when you can glide through it? Why deal with the PMI integration challenges when you can overcome them even before they occur? Why move slow when you can move at pace? What are the world's leading PMI experts doing right now to achieve profit-accelerating integrations? This podcast will give you all the answers to these questions and many more. My name is Dudley Peacock, and welcome to the 100 Days and Beyond podcast. Welcome, everyone, to another podcast for our 100 Days and Beyond, the special place where we meet and greet and entertain you, hopefully, with some really good stories, good background information and experience for those or from those people that have been there, done it, seen it, and probably made a few mistakes along the way. I think James is probably a really good example of I would say probably entrepreneur turned even more of an entrepreneur, getting involved in growing businesses, but at scale. I think if
wondered where you were going with that, Dudley. Whether you were just going to
yeah.
go with the mistakes thing, or you were going to push out on that one.
I think there's value in mistakes anyway, but as long as you learn from them, I think. What are they? I remember my father telling me, as long as not even a donkey falls in the same hole twice, and I think sometimes even I've fallen in the same hole twice because I just didn't think it through properly. But I think if you go back in a career, I mean, if I look at your bio and your career, James, I think it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, you really started and exited and built businesses before you got involved in CapEQ. And I just want to quickly give the audience a quick introduction. So James is a co-founder from CapEQ, B Corporation certified, M&A, fundraising, and strategy consulting. I want you to give us a bit of a background, because I'm going to pick and unpack some of the pointers you make on your LinkedIn bio, and I'm going to challenge you a little bit.
Oh dear Lord. Okay, Dudley.
Looking forward. Tell us about your journey. How did you get here? Where are you right now? And let's kickstart this thing.
So really, I'm in a really good place in life at the moment. But the journey to get here, I think your comment about mistakes is absolutely bang on. The key attribute, I think, of any entrepreneurship is you got to pick yourself up when you get things wrong, and you have to learn from them. And if you're not getting things wrong, you're probably not trying hard enough. And good Lord, I get things wrong frequently. So hopefully I'm learning at the same time. So I came out of a fifth generation family business in nails and fixings. Started my first business when I was 14, building computers, back when computers were hard to make and the parts were hard to get. And then briefly dallied with City Life, working as for Barcap, and then went and opened a fish and chip shop. And I remember all my friends saying to me at the time, "What on earth are you doing? Why are you giving up a role in the city to go and open a fish and chip shop?" And it turned out that selling fish and chips was actually far more profitable and a lot more fun than working in the city. So grew that business, and it was a really high quality business. Grew that into 8, 9 different locations, exited those, bought another 9 or 10 businesses, and then took a big risk in 2007, buying a business for £1, not knowing as much about M&A as I should do, and bought all the debts rather than doing what most people would do, which would be not to buy the debts. And that turned out that business needed refinancing. It had about 25 million of debt, needed refinancing. It was paying 34% over base, and turned out that 2008 refinancing was difficult. So that turned out to be an expensive lesson. So that was not part of the plan. So since then I've been just reassessing some of my candidacy routes, and then got into M&A about 15 years ago, partly to try and help people, partly because I love it, partly B, because you get to meet some amazing people and work with some amazing clients, and partly to help people not make the same mistakes I made in M&A. So that all comes together. I spent the last 10, 12 years working in sort of lower mid-market, and then 2 years ago set up with a colleague CapEQ, to really work in the impact space and to hopefully run M&A transactions within a more ethical focus, which I suspect we'll probably cover if you're not too mean. Dudley, I think you're on. I think
Yeah, I think I put
there we go.
myself on mute. So just yeah, so I'm loving that ethical part, because if I look at your summary, you talk about co-founder director of CapEQ, but I really like that part where you talk about providing ethical mergers and acquisitions advice, transaction leadership, and strategy consulting. And that word ethical, I think some people in my experience overuse that, or wrongly use it in unethical ways. But I think it's very, very important to actually have ethics in this space, or else you won't survive. I think these things catch up to one, and I think if you don't have that as a core value, and that's my belief anyway. Tell us a bit more about why you felt the need to put it ethical in there.
Okay, so whilst I wouldn't disagree with your point that if you don't have an ethical basis, you don't survive, the reality is in M&A, your clients only do the transaction once. So you don't lose your repeat customers. So the problem is that there is a big element when you look at anything in life where the business model is based on a single event in that client's life. Actually, it opens that transactional world up to an ethical issue where people can act unethically because the downside doesn't really exist as strong as it does for other customers, where if you're McDonald's and you've got horse meat in your beef, that'll kill your business really quickly because people will stop buying from you. That's there's no equivalent in the M&A world of that. It's very difficult for business owners don't talk very much to each other actually, so it's very difficult for that to spread. And there's an awful lot of conversation about ESG in M&A, but what you hear is ESG. Are our clients have ESG? What do the funds think about ESG? We never hear, or very rarely hear us talk about, how do we act as advisors? What are we doing that's ethical? And for the last 15 years, there are some amazing people in M&A. Okay, there are some really clever, really honest, really lovely people. There's also some people where there's also some businesses that don't act in the best interest of their clients, and they're not necessarily the small ones. I see that across a whole range where they're doing things that they don't consider to be unethical, but because they don't think about it like that. They don't consider whether they're harming their client. They have a different focus, and that some of that stuff needs to change, and we need to think about that a bit more in our industry.
Yeah, if you remember that 80s movie it was 80s, Gordon Gekko, that whole stripping of assets and all that, and I think it's come a long way since those days. But that
Well,
was
okay, Dad, you say that.
enjoyable.
You say that, but is that true though? I mean, we all know some of the. You look at things like Phones for You, and there's consistent headlines about companies involved in M&A where the transaction has not been to the benefit of large numbers of stakeholders. It's not been beneficial to the staff, it's not been beneficial to the customers, it's sometimes not even beneficial to a big chunk of the shareholders. And that's not changed. Those headlines continue to occur. And actually, on a long term, that's value destructive rather than value creative. I mean, look, think about it at a very basic level. There's different areas of M&A that you can look at blue chip M&A or the really big stuff. Top end, $1 billion plus. Asda, for example, recently got sold. They've now got 6.8 billion of debt to service, and the equity that they put in was 800 million. Well, Asda now has to service 6.8 billion. Okay, it's got a massive turnover, but that 6.8 billion now means you can't reinvest it in the business. Is that the right answer for the customers, for the staff? Maybe not.
I love it. I just also love the passion in which you explain it. So you're coming through with flying colors, James. You're definitely coming back to me with with some really great answers. I appreciate that. So, and it really comes out in your profile as well, because you talk about a combination of tireless energy, boundless patience, relevant expertise, cross-border experience, and good humor that makes a difference between transactional process and frustrating setbacks. And that's what I was hoping to get, and we got it in the first few minutes.
Oh well, I'm glad I haven't disappointed. I mean, look, we're really lucky, is we you get to meet, you get clients that you really make friends with, and that's the lovely thing about our business. That I've got so many friends I didn't have before who are ex-clients, and that's amazing. That's a really nice place to be, and that's how it should work.
Yeah, it is how it should work. And you've got so many stakeholders in any deal, in any transaction. And you've done over 40 M&A transactions. So you must have seen an immense amount of varying, from valuations to structuring through to the actual PMI, which is the post-merger integration work, or any sort of follow-on on that. And as you talk about value creation, it obviously, value creation sits in the eye of the beholder as well, to a certain extent, because it's value creation for one, but not necessarily for others. I think it's an unbalanced thing. But anyway, tell us a bit about that.
That's an interesting viewpoint, Ali. It can be unbalanced, but it doesn't have to be. And
Mm.
actually, the best transactions, if you take a business to market, and you go through a rigorous process, and you work really hard, and you reach out to as many potential strategic acquirers as possible, or interested investors as possible, what you get is a range of interests. And actually, what we're guilty of as advisors, and you see this frustration with acquirers an awful lot, who say we won't engage with advisors, and usually that's because the advisors are not looking at the transaction as a whole. What they're looking at is just their client, and they're saying, well, let's see what I can get over on the other party, without understanding that value creation is where money drops out. So this idea that you can just put people put the other side in a pot and keep them there and not engage with them just doesn't work. If what you actually do is engage with them and work out how they want to create value, what their PMI process looks like, actually why are they investing, what do they want to get out of this, and then help them understand that value and help them to create that value. Actually, you know what? Suddenly they say, actually, this is more valuable than they thought it was. And then suddenly you're getting value out of the transaction of the client, and then suddenly the client's enjoying the journey, and suddenly things like earnouts, which were, clients always come out with a hate, we're not accepting an earnout. Well, you know what? If you give the client a range of options, sometimes they do choose a transaction with earnout, because they understand what's going on, because they spent time with the acquirer, and the acquirer understands the seller, and depending on what side of the table you're sitting on, there's good understanding, and that leads to post-merger integration that works, and that leads to value creation. And at the moment, there are too many M&A transactions that fail, and that's partly unfortunately because the M&A advisors don't spend enough time helping both parties to integrate.
Yeah, and it's got, I'm guessing, and you'll probably come back with a really good answer. I'm guessing it's got a lot to do with obviously client relationship, but education and getting people to talk and getting people to understand each other's positions. It's not really it's not sort of a football match, if you like. There doesn't have to be a winner and a loser. Everyone can win, and it's that sort of process. And you very much from an advisory point of view, sell side. As far as I know, you work a lot on the sell side, but on the buy side, tell us a little bit about sort of where you sit in terms of that whole transaction.
Yeah, so about 60% of our transactions are sell side, about 30% are buy side. We typically act on behalf of PLCs. PLCs are larger corporates who are looking to have some strategic rationale, and we are on the buy side. We are great believers in what you call programmatic M&A. So instead of looking for that one big change event that's going to shift their business completely and really, alter the trajectory of their business, there's a ton of risk on that for an acquisition, for an acquirer. What we're looking to do is help them make strategic acquisitions continuously that change the outcome of the business, but actually allow them to integrate them effectively and help them to actually make that integration and actually help. And part of that is to help the other side to actually show us what we need to see. And you're right, some of that is and when you sit on either side of the table, a lot of that is expectation management, a lot of that is training, and a lot of that sometimes we'll sit the other side from a when we're sitting on the buy side, we'll sit the other side from a potential target, and we'll say, right, you need some help. You need to go out and get yourself some advisors, and we'll signpost them to some guys that we know are really good, and not because there's any there's any relationship between those advisors, and actually usually we're pointing to people we know are going to be a pain in the backside, but we know they're being a pain in the backside because they help them, and that's the right thing to do because they need that advice, and that advice eventually helps the transaction flow better and become more successful. And that is the key, and that's a key thing. Transaction support is a really key area in to get transactions complete sometimes.
What I found most fascinating, even chatting to your team at CapEQ, has been that ability to put deals together in terms of the structuring, and also helping understand the dynamic of what happens after. What, especially from a strategic point of view. It's a great idea to have it some a corporate decision being made. We should be doing acquisitions in this space. We should be adding in additional businesses. But also thinking in terms of things like sustainability. How do we make sure that the businesses we are acquiring will actually move us into the next sort of phase of the markets, etc. But at the same time, potentially making acquisitions that are non-core, but can bolster the business in other places. And it's a lot more than just sort of buying additional product or additional geographic areas, and et cetera, et cetera. So tell us a bit about that mix. Sort of what have you seen that's out there in the market from a corporate, so very much corporate strategic buying at this stage? So what are people doing in 2022?
Oh, see, that's really interesting. So what's changing actually is the funding of transactions in a lot of respects. So for a long time, actually, corporate acquirers were struggling to match the valuations of private equity. So, and the private equity had so much money, the LPs were, putting so much funds into the PE houses that the private equity had so much dry powder, and still does, but it's just starting to fall back a little bit. That actually the opportunities for the corporates just weren't there like they used to be, and that's now changing a little bit. Starting to see that change a little bit, and what you find is that corporates have got a lot of money on the balance sheet quite often. They see that they have to keep changing, they have to keep evolving, they have to keep moving. The guys we work for tend to actually have some ethical impact. So that colors what we see, Dudley. There's a kind of a, it's not like we're working for a weapons manufacturer and saying, let's go out and buy a plastics recycling business. We tend to be in the sectors in renewables and health and education and that kind of space. But I guess what we're seeing is a greater focus on what drives actual value. So you go back 10 years ago, and there was a corporate rush just to buy anything. Conglomerates were quite common. Actually, there's a lot fewer conglomerates now. The SPACs didn't really take off in the UK for reasons I think we probably all know. And therefore, what you're seeing is much more strategic acquisitions, where the corporates are really looking at acquiring stuff that changes their trajectory, that isn't just volume or client base or geography. It's something that really adds value, intrinsic value that they can't get anything else. Scarcity value. There's a drive to scarcity value that has always been there, but I think is probably becoming more focused. And there is a drive that people understand that consumers are focused, and it is ultimately consumers that drive everything in the UK economy. The consumers' focus is changing, and therefore businesses are changing with that as well. And that's been a clear change as well. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely, and very well too. I want to. You touched on ESG and a lot of these, these acronyms and that, but environment, social, governance, etc. That's been around for a while, and often people hide, or I've seen PE firms and that hide behind that in terms of that it could maybe be in their brief, but there's a new thing that's popped up, not relatively new, but it's now becoming more and more prominent. That's EDI, which is that whole equity, diversity, and inclusion. That acronym is popping up from time to time. And do you see it a lot, or is that just something that is spoken about and generally not really implemented? Is it, when you get down to a hardcore transaction and you're talking about sort of adding value, growing strategically, do those things become a strategic advantage, or is it just something that people talk about?
Do you mean EDI especially, or ESG and EDI as a whole?
Well,
Or
the two of them, or both, or either or.
So there's a whole that's a short question with a very, very long answer.
I'm calling it a hot potato.
I'm trying to pass it back to you. Okay, so we're a B Corp. Let's start there. So we're a B Corp. So there's two answers to this. There's one is going back to what I said earlier, which is talking about ESG from a client's perspective and a funder's perspective, and talking about ESG from the M&A provider's perspective. In transactions, ESG, EDI from an M&A provider's perspective doesn't, from our perspective, doesn't exist. I don't see it talked about in our industry. From the transactional perspective, so that is the counterparties in the transaction and the funder, there are some people where they are genuine and absolutely focused on stakeholder impact. And stakeholder will mean everybody: the community, the staff, the customers, the wider community. I mean, whether that is EDI or other. And actually we're a B Corp because of a private equity fund, Bridges Fund Management, which was one of the first B Corps in the UK. I met them as part of a transaction that we did with them, and was really impressed by that firm, who absolutely lived what they said, and that was just a revelation to me. It was an absolute revelation, and there are a couple of others as well who I'm not going to start mentioning everybody, but those guys, they absolutely lived as they said they did. Does it provide a commercial advantage? In some areas, it's a commercial necessity. So, but they're in the sectors where you'd expect it to be. In the sectors where it doesn't, does it provide a commercial advantage? In the long term, my view is it does. But you have to. One of the difficulties we have at the moment is we all talk about ESG, but then don't talk about profit. And so we're a B Corp, so we're a not just for profit, but we are absolutely for profit. If you look at conscious capitalism, is a space that doesn't preclude making a profit, unless you get this dichotomy when you hear talking heads on the news talking about this, and they talk about ESG as if suddenly it precludes profitability. It absolutely doesn't. The two have to go hand in hand. Capitalism has changed the world for a better place. Every single thing, everything that's been invented has been invented because of capitalism. Now, that doesn't mean that capitalism has just been a good thing, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that in general, as a force for good, it absolutely exists, but it needs to be tempered. It needs to be tempered with more than just the thought of the capital. It has to think beyond the capital. It has to think beyond the capital investors. But it has to include the capital investor. You can't have a transaction where the investors invest money and don't get a return, because why would they invest the money? That's just crazy. So if you think of ESG as something where it gives more stability, it allows people to feel more in control, it allows people to be more supportive, it gets consumers to, and again, consumers drive our economy, so it is ultimately consumers that drive this. It allows consumers to make a better choice for your product, then eventually it comes back. But it's not a short-term game. It's not a short-term, let's do this and we'll make money tomorrow. It is longer term, and actually probably one of our biggest issues over the past 20 years has been the reduction in timeline. We used to think 15, 20, 30 years ahead. That seems to have come down. In politics, business, it seems to have been brought forward and forward. It needs to push back out again. We need to be doing things that help people 15 years in advance, and ESG is part of that. That longer term view, because in 15 years, when you built a whether it's a nuclear, whatever you think about nuclear or wind or wherever you think, these things take time to get a return. But then when they get a return, suddenly you get a massive beneficial hit from it.
Yeah, I love that's a great answer. But the capital and the actual return on investment is massively important. But corporate acquirers don't necessarily, and I'm glad you mentioned timeline, because that was one of the things I want to just bring it out a little, because being on the sort of corporate advisory side of things, where you're helping with larger entities do strategic acquisitions, often it appears to me, and again, you're going to have to just tell me more on your experiences, is in comparison to private equity has to deliver on their mandate, whatever it is, in terms of the fund that they've created. They have to deliver within a certain period of time, and they literally build value through a consolidation of a multiple number of entities, thereby increasing the turnover and EBITDA values and getting higher multiples at exit, and not necessarily growing or doing a lot more in terms of PMI and growing the portfolio businesses. Corporate acquirers, on the other end, they would do more of a strategic purchase, but the PMI side of things, the post-merger integration work and the actual value creation is a lot more than just bundling a whole lot of companies together. However, it is advantageous to add additional revenue to your top line. I mean, that obviously is a good thing as a PLC, just from a CEO point of view, being able to say, hey, we've had X% growth. However, on the flip side, it will take longer to get more value creation, not just by bundling or by putting a few platform businesses together and a few add-ons. Would you agree with that? It
No.
should take longer. No?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, I don't agree. I don't agree. So, okay, so look at the typical PE fund, right? It's got a 10-year time horizon, which they need to be out at 10 years. Okay, so I think we all understand that. So that typically 3 to 7 year hold period is pretty typical. I mean, I'm discounting family offices here. Okay, so let's talk about vanilla PE. They need to be out. So yes, they have to value create, but some of that value creation is within financial engineering. Not so much anymore, but that still exists as an entity. And sometimes they do. There is some PMI going on when they're especially if there's a buy and build or a bolt-on acquisition going on. So that does happen. There is value creation there. But if you've got a genuine strategic acquisition, typically, within 12 months, if it's the right acquisition and you understand why you're acquiring it and you understand what you understand. Let me rephrase that. If as an acquirer, you know why you should be acquiring something and how a target fits into that strategy, then the ability to drive value out of that transaction is very quick. Now, one of the core errors that we see is that acquirers don't really know why they're acquiring. So what you often find is they're acquiring because we want to get bigger. Actually, that's a really bad reason to acquire, because what we see is, yes, you get bigger, and then you divide your management time between two entities that aren't one, and suddenly both of them fail, falter, start to erode, and then you leave the one you bought and they get sold cheaply. And that's a really common M&A story. And that's partly because the advisor, either because the management team, the C-suite, haven't sat down and thought about this, or they haven't had an advisor who said, you need to think about this. What is it that you're trying to add? What are you trying to solve? Where are you trying to move to? Or they've gone off and found a target that they really like that seems cheap, and they've gone off and acquired it. And those elements, that's not a strategic acquisition. And too many transactions aren't strategic. If it's genuinely strategic, then value drops out really quickly. We've seen that happen really quickly.
Yeah, but that's why I think it's so critical to have the right advisors, guys like yourselves, on a strategic discussion long before you even look at what target to go for. What is it we're trying to do with the business? Where are we trying to go, etc. Because I had a conversation this morning. I had a meeting with the guy that I'm doing some advisory work on, and he's in aquaculture. I mean, he's got he's entirely in aquaculture. And he says, look, he came across, there's this hotel chain that he thinks he should get involved in. It's like, why would you do that? Why would you, that's just not even close to what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
You can maybe supply a bit of fish if you like to your hotel, but I mean, I don't think people can eat that much. But I think what happens a lot, and this is, you're going to have to just reply on my on my crazy example, but you see this all the time where people say, hey, my business I want to exit my business. I'm going to approach a number of people I think, or organizations I think, who might be in the market to buy. They go and approach an entity. Entity says, oh, this looks like a good idea, and then they buy it. And as opposed to saying, oh, wait a minute, we actually need to decide on our strategy going forward, have the right advisors in place, and then roll that plan out. And if whatever they come across in terms of target fits, that would be right. Would that be a fair
I think that's
view?
probably. I think yeah, in a broad brush approach, that's probably fair. I think that but to give a lot of acquirers their due, it's actually quite hard to find advisors who can take that advisory perspective, because they need to have some commercial background. They need to have some ability to understand their client's business, and that takes a bit of commercial nous, and that's not that common to find. And from a seller's perspective, if it's a retirement sale, which frequently businesses are of multiple sizes, they start out with, I'm just retiring, I want to leave. And quite often one of our biggest pieces is to say to people, please come and talk to us 5 years before you want to exit, because then at least we can help find the right party, we can help add value, we can help steer you into the right place, we can actually think about your staff. And because what happens is sellers particularly start off with one view that's just, we want to retire and exit. And then when you really get into the detail of, okay, what do you want to happen to your staff, and what do you want to happen to your clients, and they're very, they spent years building the business, and it turns out they're very, very caring about all of these. And suddenly if they're sending someone where they're just going to strip the business, the client's like, oh, I don't like this. But if they don't have any choice at that point, then they're in a really bad place. And unfortunately, I've only ever seen that happen once, and it's one of those ones that fills me with pain still. And I don't even like thinking about it, but it was just a scenario that just couldn't be done any other way. There was we had no other ability. There was no movement in that transaction. It was one acquirer and one exit. And that was that. But had that particular person come to us a few years earlier, we could have found a different route to exit. And so that's probably the biggest problem. And it's a problem for acquirers, because sometimes the timing has to be right. For two entities can be the right entity, but they have to align at the right moment. And sometimes you need some time to get that moment to be right. So it's not always a one hit, I think. And again, it's back to ethics from an advisory perspective. We are really bad at being honest with our clients on both the buy side and the sell side, and we need to be better at this. We need to be honest with and I'm painting our industry badly, and that's not fair for a big chunk of our industry who are very good at being honest with their clients and being very good at advisory. At the lower end of the market particularly, we are very bad at being honest with our clients, and unfortunately it paints the whole of our industry in a very bad light. So there is a bit of a lot of work done to be honest with clients about actually what the outcome may be, and what they need to do, and what they need to think about, and what outcome they need to be thinking about. And with acquirers as well, who you need to be very honest with them about what they can actually achieve, and what's when they look at a target, what difficulties they're going to have, and how hard is PMI going to be. Because one of the things you frequently see is people not saying to them, have you thought about culture? Have you thought about who the people are? Have you thought about, what are they actually like emotionally? If you don't get that right, then you're on a bit of a behind to nothing before you start.
Yeah, and I think sales side could easily be painted, and what I like about CapEQ especially, and that's why I'm speaking to you and a number of your colleagues, is the fact that you got the business acumen, you've got you've been in your own business before, you've actually established, you've exited, you've done the hard yards, if you like, of understanding business and what it's like actually owning a business and exiting it. But more so, On the sales side, the problem with the sales side is that the automatic sort of, if it's a mid-size entity, let's call it a retirement sale, the natural tendency is to look for a broker, for instance, or if it's a bigger business, it's sort of, I'm going to an investment bank or something like that, not necessarily getting the business ready or complete. Because I mean, I like to see it in like a checkbox, like what makes a business complete? Do you have all your systems, process, procedures? Or do you have your, your system, your software, your culture, and all that stuff sorted? That's a complete business, and not all businesses are complete by the time the retirement's supposed to happen. so,
No,
so from an advisory point of view, if you look at a sales side, I think from a differentiator, I think CapEQ for me differentiates yourselves by having done so many transactions, but also having been in business yourself. So the acumen side of things, the ability to see a business for what it is. And I think when you work with the sales side, the to get in under the hood, to better understand the business before you go to market is you need a bit of time. You need to have a bit of runway. You can't be like,
okay.
get a call this week and I want to have it on the market next week. That stuff doesn't seem to work very well. What is your view on that?
No, look, that you can do things quickly by exception, but it's very, very rarely optimal. It's very rarely optimal. We've got a client at the moment that we have worked with for about 18 months on a no-fee basis. We've just been advising them on a monthly basis with a phone call, taking time to understand the business, to really get under the business, and then help them to understand what they need to change. And they've gone on a process of changing, and they and because of that, they were recently approached and have received an approach from somebody that they would never have received had they not spent the time to change their business. And they're very clear that a lot of that is down to some of the advice we've managed to give them over time, because we have some of that background in terms of commercial knowledge, and we managed to put some of that time in. And that's absolutely critical. And so the more you can spend doing that, and you can look at, as you say, processes, owner reliance, even in the even up to £100 million businesses where there isn't a professional C-suite, owner reliance continues to be a problem. But even when there is professional C-suite, making sure that they understand what they're trying to achieve, making sure that the business does have the processes, making sure the business has the paperwork, making sure that the customers have got the right contracts. So there is so much that's obvious, but when you're in business, you don't need to think about it sometimes, because you're running at day-to-day basis. What's really common is the KPIs a business uses, not the KPIs that an acquirer needs to see. And it's really frequent that you see the financial KPIs are being completely different. They're just, and the C-suite or the business owner doesn't need the KPIs the acquirer needs, because he knows the business, right? They're like, yeah, but I know how profitable I am, because I can see that we've made 28 units this week. And it's like, what, I get that, but where's the margin? Well, I know what the margin is. It drops out, in 6 months' time, and always does, because you do this. It's like, okay, get it, but that doesn't work from an acquirer's perspective, So sometimes it's as simple as that. It's just, change how you do your management information. But unless you spend some time doing it and understanding it, we've got stories of there's always war stories. There was a transaction we did a little while ago where there was a big plot of land on a manufacturing site, lovely family-owned business, and right in the middle of the plot of land was a swimming pool-shaped size piece of land that they didn't own in the middle of their land, and it was what their factory was built on top of. And it was like, well, who owns this piece of land? And no one knew. There was this like little square. So, well, how did that happen? And they were like, wow, we bought this piece of land and that piece of land, and we never fixed it. I was like, well, okay, we need to go and fix that. But unless you've got an ability to understand, you can look at land registry title deeds and say, okay, well, there's a problem there. You don't pick up on this stuff. It's that kind of rounded knowledge that really helps clients.
Yeah, and I want to ask you just as a side note, because I really enjoy that part where where you're talking about that there are these sort of nuances when you get to a business, and there are things that the owner or whoever the shareholders and that haven't thought about, because potentially it's a third, fourth, fifth generation business, and I mean, the title deeds, they probably don't even remember where they stored them.
Yeah.
but tell me, multi-generational businesses, I mean, if you look at sort of say third, fourth, fifth generation, they might be bigger and bigger. Are multi-generational businesses um, different to the founder-owned business? I mean, multi-generation for me has got a totally different dynamic, in the sense that the previous generations still seem to have a bit of a hold, or there's a legacy element, or there's some kind of, I don't know what it is, but there seems to be slightly different mentality. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah,
But
that's
as opposed to owner managed, owner sold, as opposed to third, fourth, fifth generation. Would you agree with that? As you've got any experience around that? I mean,
oh,
you yourself were
yeah.
involved in a multi-generational business.
So it's really dangerous to play to uh, to paintbrush these kind of situations, um, because I think they don't subscribe to stereotypes. The stereotype is that the first generation, the founder is wildly successful. The second generation stabilizes the business. The third generation spends all the money. I mean, that is the age old. By the fourth generation, it's gone bust. That is the age old trope about family businesses, right? And there is a grain of truth there. Okay, so why are entrepreneurs successful? It's because they're normally hungry. They're hungry to do something different. They're hungry to be successful. They have something that drives them. And that drive disappears when you're comfortable and your life is, you've got money and you don't need to worry about things. And that there is, and you're probably your that drive for money probably does evaporate a little bit. However, the fourth generation family business we came out of, actually my cousins took it over, both phenomenally entrepreneurial. I mean, way more than I am, and didn't need to be, but absolutely were. And the difference in that business and other businesses I've seen, and something that we always tell family businesses is, ideally, one generation sells the business to the next generation, doesn't give it to them. And what happens is, if the next generation actually wants it, they'll buy it. And if they don't want it, they won't. Because what you need is somebody who's genuinely invested, who's genuinely, there saying, okay, if this business is worth 100 million, you know what? I'll pay 100 million for it, and I'll have to pay the debt, and I'll have to cover it, and it'll be really hard work, and I'll make it successful. And that doesn't preclude the previous generation then helping them. It doesn't preclude them then, staying on the sidelines and helping. But it does mean that the person who's transacted has bought the business and controls it and has to live or die by it, and the previous generation are then on the sidelines, but can help from a perspective of, what normally happens. The worst scenarios is where there's a lack of control that actually passes. And I don't mean in terms of legal control, because often it's day-to-day control is not I think, as you know, it's not doing legal control. It's where the dad or the mum says, I'm going to step out, and then doesn't. And so, or where the son says, I'll take it over, and then doesn't. There's a mismatch in expectations and deliverance. So one of the things we say is to sell it between the generations. And if they don't want to buy it, then they're not the right people to buy it. That's if they don't see the value of it, then are they the right people for the stakeholders, for your staff? Are they the right people to really take that forward? That's the question you need to ask yourself.
So I got a case study. So I've got a client that is a family business. It's around 30 odd years, and the father and the mother, they had started the business. They had built it to a really, it's a magnificent business, and they had three sons. And the one son is probably more managerial, less technical. The other one is a really good sales guy. And the third one is almost like a mini scientist. I mean, he likes to experiment and build things and so on. And it just suits the three of them together. If they were one person, that we make a really good one person to take the business forward. Now you've got three individuals that are the sons. Each one of them are different in terms of their outlook in life, and they're in different stages of their family life as well. So some of them got small kids, and one of them is married, etc. And that's a very interesting scenario, because how does the father step back from not getting himself involved, because sometimes the brothers disagree.
Yeah.
and
Well,
I mean, these are real things you get to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I'm guessing, when you deal with family business.
yes. I mean, we don't often have the luxury of helping the business at the point it transfers, and you wish you did. And usually it's accountants or lawyers who are involved at that point. And we love accountants and lawyers. They make our life immeasurably easier and possible, actually, I should say. But sometimes they're not necessarily the right tool for the job, and sometimes that transfer isn't the right. They don't think about it in the right way sometimes. So one of the things that we have seen work well is, in that scenario, you have to consider whether the son should be running the business. So they don't. That doesn't mean they don't have to have the benefit, or don't have to not work, don't have to be evacuated from the business. But what you can very easily do is put the business in trust, so they can have the benefit of the income, and they can be employees, and they can do the bit they enjoy. And this takes some coaching and some time and some emotional coaching, so everyone understands what's going on and everyone gets comfortable with this. But what we tend to find is that a lot of the kids are taking the business over because the parents expect them to, and therefore
Yes.
they do it because they have the weight of parental expectation. And actually, sometimes, you mentioned there's someone who's a, mentioned someone who's a genius in who's a scientist. Very, very few scientists I know actually want to run a business. I know lots of scientists. I'm married to one. She wouldn't want to run a business. And therefore, if they're employees in the space they want to be in, they can add massive value. And what you then do is you put a really professional C-suite who manages the business, and that's not to say the sons can't sit on the board. They can't. They can input strategically. They just don't need to be operational.
Love
There's
it.
lots of ways of running it like that.
Love it.
We
I
had a,
think
we had a
that's
sorry,
okay.
we had a family transaction exactly like that, where we had a CEO and a pair of brothers, and the CEO ran the business, and it worked really well. And when it came to when we were acting on the sales side, when we acted on the sales side, the CEO did the whole transaction and stayed with the business, because that's what she wanted to do. And the
Love it.
son was taken out. It was de-risked it from the buyer's perspective. Just worked all over.
Love it. Love it. Absolutely love it. There are two more topics I want to cover, and I'm hoping we're going to be able to do it. The one is, have you seen or experienced sort of multiple exits? In other words, a founder or owner, somebody trying to sell their business, but preferring to stay in the business, exiting or doing a partial sale. I mean, sometimes we make the assumption that the entire 100% shareholding is going to pass hands, but maybe the person is still very, very keen to carry on. However, they only want to exit partially. Do you get involved in that type of thing, doing multiple exits? So again, when the business grows, let's say it's private equity or corporate, when the business gets to the next level, they can exit again in terms of selling a next chunk of shares. I mean, have you ever seen that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really common, especially especially when you look at private equity. Rollover is it's just a part of a transaction nowadays, and whether that is you exiting on a transactional on a executive basis, or whether that's just you exiting part of your shareholding. What we are seeing is more of that happening with strategic acquirers, trade acquirers, and that's quite an interesting evolution that we didn't see 15 years ago. So you are now starting to see people sell a control stake. Let's talk about control transactions where you sell over 50%, where they might sell 55%, and effectively what they actually look for is partnership. And what I think we're starting to see more of, and I don't know if this is the market changing or because of our specific focus on the market, is people who are younger, in their 40s. I say younger, but you know what I mean. It's not a retirement sale; it's pre-retirement sale. Late 30s, 40s, who have spent 10 years building the business, and suddenly realise that they don't want to leave, but they have enough self-awareness to realize that they also aren't the right person to take it from here to here, and they need some help, whether that is funding, whether that is technical help, whether that is managerial help, whatever that help is. And they go out and say, we want to find the right partner. And that's part of that ESG piece for us, is who is the right partner for you and your business. And that's when you really start to think about what's the right for customers, clients, all that kind of good stuff, because that's critical to that transaction. It's absolutely crucial. So yeah, we see that more and more, and it's actually a really nice place to do it in a trade transaction, strategic transaction, because it's not just about the money then. It's much more about the right fit, and it's on a personal basis an interesting transaction to do, because it's more complex and there's more people involved, and you get in people's heads more, and you get really involved with people, and that's what we enjoy. We really enjoy sort of
No,
understanding what works for people.
I love that. I can see the smile on your face. So I mean, I think, James, for me, that's again why really good advisors are so important in this whole process, because you need somebody to ask the right questions. You need someone to paint out the scenarios, the what ifs, doing the what ifs. And if you do this, you're probably going to get that. How much of the business should you relinquish? What does it mean? And what does it actually mean to be absorbed into a larger corporate entity? Are you ready for that? Are you psychologically or are you mentally ready for having a different type of arrangement? You might have to start reporting to somebody as opposed to being your own boss, kind of thing. There's a whole lot of dynamics around that there. The last one I wanted to ask you before I want to ask you more about CapEQ, and that is, you work with corporate acquirers and so on, and tell me a bit about sort of the move these days. And I see there seems to be a move in that direction. There seems to be more separations, more carve-outs than before. And I'm just again, I'm just sort of prompting you into coming back with one of your hot potato answers. But yeah, I mean, is that true? I mean, are companies saying, look, this part we actually don't need anymore, we're rather going to go in this direction? Are carve-outs and separations, do you get involved in that? Is that something that is you're seeing more of, or is it just very much the same?
Yeah, I'll be honest, that's actually not a central part of our business. So we do it, but it's by exception rather than by design. So corporate carve-outs, I mean, they're fine, but they're very technical, and it's great. We're more than capable of doing the technical stuff absolutely all day long, but it doesn't usually involve people, and we like working with people. So with the right C-suite, we'll absolutely get involved with carve-outs, and we've done a couple. We've actually done a couple in Europe this year. The ones, again, and it's a bit difficult because we're a boutique, so we don't see hundreds of corporates. The ones we get involved with are the ones where the corporate is absolutely focusing on what they're good at, and are divesting themselves of the stuff they shouldn't have bought a few years ago, and are trying to find the right home for it. But we're getting involved with those ones where they care about what happens to their clients and their staff. It seems to us that we're seeing more of that. I don't have empirical data that supports that, and it's sometimes you have your own echo chamber on these things, so I'm not certain that's true. I hope it's true and it feels true. Whether it is, I think we probably need another 5 years of data and some hindsight.
Yeah, and obviously with I would say, let's call it the fallout of the events of the last few years, we probably still need to see the effect in the market in the next 3 to 5, 7 years anyway, of where things are going to end up. I mean, interest rates are going up at a pace now, and so on. I mean, there's a whole lot of challenges coming our way.
Well, you've got to. I mean, from an M&A perspective, you've got to wonder what's going to happen to private equity. Now, how is private equity going to? Is the dry powder going to evaporate from the market because the LPs have got other places to put their money? When bond rates start climbing and you can get gilts that are starting to provide a very long-term secure return on investment, I think private equity have had to pay higher multiples to get into businesses nowadays, and perhaps exiting the multiples won't be quite as easy at the higher rates. Will we start to see some of that dry powder evaporate, and will that change the market? I don't know. There's much cleverer people than I am in the world to discuss these things, but I suspect there'll have to be some effect. I can't imagine there won't be. So you're right. I mean, there's an element there just in terms of increasing interest rates, quite apart from what happened in COVID and all that kind of good stuff and not so good stuff.
Yeah, and I think also the fact that I think the market has become more competitive in terms of the availability of good quality assets to acquire as well has also put a lot of pressure. I think we're going to see some changes, and it's going to be very interesting to to watch this thing play out. So James, I mean, I really do want you to come on a future episode and give us an update in terms of where we are at and so on. But before we run out of time, because we've got a few minutes left, I really want you to talk a little bit about CapEQ, sort of what you do, what differentiates you, and how can people get hold of you?
So CapEQ, CAPEQ.com. What differentiates us? I think we've covered some of the stuff in terms of we're one of Europe's only B Corps, so we're not just for profit. We will treat our clients ethically and look at the wider transaction. We are very cross-border. We work in the lower mid-market, so that's transactions typically between 10 and 50 million with a little bit either side. Or 10 to 100 million, probably more accurately right now. Every transaction we do is partner led by at least one partner on a day-to-day basis. All of our staff, we're a boutique, so all of our staff are time served. They all have at least 10 years in M&A. We've got a head of research who's a qualified lawyer. We've got a transaction support guy, used to be a partner at a big 4 firm and has spent 30 years in transaction support and M&A. We've got some amazing staff, and we really focus on helping clients achieve the right outcome and the best outcome. The staff, the partners have all got a significant amount of commercial experience as well as M&A experience. We're FCA regulated, which is important for so many reasons, and we've chosen to do that because I think it's important for clients to have some security. If you're thinking about employing an M&A advisor, please look at what being FCA regulated brings and decide whether that's important to you. It should be, and there's all sorts of reasons why it should be. We have an absolute ton of client feedback. We aim to have 100% net promoter score, and that's what we run on at the moment. We have a whole litany of clients where we absolutely focus on them and what they need to achieve. Does that kind of cover it in a minute?
Very well, actually, yes. So, I mean, for me, I mean, I've from the various discussions we've had, I've been very impressed with your organization, and
Thanks,
hopefully we could have more discussions and also see how the journey unfolds, because I think this is probably just a snapshot in time, because things do change and things do move on. So you please come back on another show. James, I'm going to say thank you very much. I'm going to say goodbye to the audience, and then I'm going to come back to you. So stay on the line, and then I'm going to chat to you now.
Thanks, Andy. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for today for our latest episode of 100 Days and Beyond, the podcast where we focus on that special fraternity where mergers, acquisitions, but especially the value add side of things of business acquisitions, advisory, and so on. And I think today, especially with the company of James and the CapEQ team, which we will be interviewing more of as we go. What I really like about the company and about this advisory space is if you've got the right advisor, you got someone who is well experienced, that is in the trenches, but has got loads of experience in terms of multiple transactions, which can reduce the amount of problems and issues you're going to have. It sort of gets you around not falling into every single pothole, getting yourself entangled in things that you shouldn't get involved in, and also just getting yourself ready for a proper exit if it's sell side, on the buy side, getting yourself in that strategic position to do the right kind of acquisition to grow shareholder value, stakeholder value, but doing it in an ethical way. And I really like that as a word that I've got as a takeaway from James today. Thanks again, James. Thanks to everybody for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode of 100 Days and Beyond. Hi everybody, this is Dudley again, and if you need help with a future or existing post-merger integration, I want to invite you to arrange a free, no obligation meeting with us. During the meeting, we'll find out exactly what you need, what your challenges are, and we'll explain how our unique PMI slipstream method can help you. Simply call us or visit mergerintegration.co.uk. That's mergerintegration.co.uk, or come to our website, skillfulpursuit.com.